I remember reading about a species of tree, the lodgepole pine, and how its seeds are sealed inside cones by a tough resin. They can sit on the forest floor for years, decades even, just waiting. They don't germinate when the soil is good or the rain is plentiful. They only release their seeds. They only allow for the possibility of new life in the intense cleansing heat of a forest fire. It's a fact that has always stayed with me. A quiet and brutal truth about the nature of waiting and the conditions for rebirth. The tree can be surrounded by all the right things: water, sunlight, fertile ground. But it is programmed for a different kind of rightness, a harsher, more honest one. It is built not just to survive the blaze, but to require it. Its most vital moment is not one of comfort, but of conflagration. And I think about that tree a lot when I think about my life, about the years I spent in a state of quiet, resin-sealed waiting. I was in a place that, by every external measure, was the right place. A good job, a nice apartment in a respectable part of the city, a circle of friends who were on the same trajectory. We were all fitting ourselves into the same template. A life of gradual, predictable ascent. We'd meet for drinks and talk about promotions, about mortgage rates, about the subtle, unspoken rules of success that everyone seemed to understand. I learned the lexicon. I knew when to laugh at the right kind of jokes, when to offer a sympathetic nod, when to lean in with a piece of industry gossip that showed I was in the know. I became fluent in the language of that world. I could navigate its corridors with my eyes closed. I had fit in. I had done the thing you're supposed to do. But fitting in is a strange and subtle kind of violence you perform on yourself. It's not a loud, dramatic breaking. It's a daily, quiet sanding down of your own edges. You feel the friction at first, a sharp, persistent rub against your spirit. The meetings that drain you for reasons you can't articulate. The social obligations that feel like wearing a coat 2 sizes too small. The hollow echo of your own laughter when it's aimed at something you don't truly find funny. At first, you notice the friction. You feel the rub. But then, over time, you get used to the sensation. The sharp edges become smooth. The discomfort becomes a low, humming background noise. The kind you only notice in its absence. You stop feeling the rub, not because it's gone, but because you've gone numb in that spot. You've calloused over. My callus was a thick, heavy thing. It was the persona I put on every morning with my suit jacket. It was the way I learned to talk about my ambitions in terms of quarterly reports and 5-year plans, instead of the wild, chaotic, and beautiful dreams that used to flicker behind my eyes when I was younger. Those dreams didn't die. They were just sealed away like those pine seeds, waiting for a heat that never seemed to come. I remember sitting in my apartment, which was decorated in tasteful neutral colors, everything in its place, and feeling a profound, echoing emptiness. It was the emptiness of a museum after hours. Everything was correct, everything was curated, but it was sterile. There was no life in it, no mess, no soul. The most terrifying part wasn't the sadness. It was the comfort. The numbness was comfortable. The predictable rhythm of my life was a lullaby, a sedative. It's so much easier to stay in the warm bath of mediocrity than to step out into the cold, uncertain air of a life that might actually mean something. To step out is to acknowledge the chill, to feel the goosebumps on your skin, to accept that you might be shivering for a long, long time. And so I stayed in the bath. I turned the hot water on when it started to cool. I told myself that this was maturity, that this was what growing up felt like, that the quiet death of your spirit was the price of admission to the adult world. I remember a specific moment, a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting. The room was all glass and polished steel, overlooking the city. The sun was setting, casting long, dramatic shadows between the skyscrapers. Someone was presenting a slide deck, filled with graphs and charts that were meant to signify progress, growth. The lines on the graphs went up and to the right. Everyone was nodding. I was nodding. And I had this sudden, out-of-body experience. I saw myself from the ceiling. I saw a man in a well-tailored suit, sitting in a comfortable chair in a room full of successful people, nodding at a graph. And I felt a wave of such profound, gut-wrenching grief that I thought I might be sick. It wasn't grief for a person, but for a life. It was the grief for the person I was supposed to be, for the life that was supposed to be mine. It was the grief of realizing that I had built a beautiful gilded cage and had very carefully locked myself inside. I had the key, but my hand had forgotten the motion of turning it. That was the beginning of the fire. It didn't start with a roar. It started with a single hot ember of recognition in the pit of my stomach. The heat was the truth. And the truth once felt cannot be unfelt. It starts to burn its way through the layers of numbness, through the calluses, through the resin that has kept your true self sealed away for safekeeping. It is not a comfortable heat. It is agonizing. It feels like failure. It feels like you're breaking the one unbreakable rule. The rule that says once you fit, you must stay fitted. We are taught from such a young age to seek belonging. Find your tribe. Find your people. Find your place in the world. And that's not bad advice. But we are never taught the second, more difficult lesson. How to recognize when the belonging is a lie. When the tribe you found is not yours, but one you were adopted into out of convenience or fear. When the place you occupy in the world is a slot you were squeezed into, not a space you grew to fill. Fitting in is about shape. Belonging is about substance. You can be the right shape for a hole and still be made of the wrong material. You can be a square peg in a square hole. But if you're made of wood and the hole is made of stone, you will eventually splinter and crack from the pressure. I started to crack. It was quiet at first. A missed deadline here. A canceled social plan there. I started walking home a different way, through parts of the city I'd never seen, just to feel something unfamiliar. I started listening to different music, reading books that had no relevance to my career. I was foraging for scraps of my old self, trying to find a trail of breadcrumbs back to a person I could barely remember. It felt indulgent. It felt wasteful. There's a deep-seated guilt in prioritizing your own soul over your societal function. It feels like you're abandoning your post. The fire began to spread. The ember became a flame. The comfortable numbness was replaced by a raw, screaming sensitivity. Every moment of inauthenticity felt like a physical wound. The small talk at the coffee machine was a dagger. The strategic corporate language in my emails was a poison on my tongue. I was a foreigner in my own life, and I had forgotten the language of my homeland. I was shedding a skin I didn't even know I was wearing, and the process was excruciating. It was a molting of the spirit. There was no new skin underneath, just raw, tender, exposed nerve. I was a walking wound. I remember the day I finally quit my job. It wasn't a dramatic movie-style scene where I told my boss off and stormed out. It was quiet. It was a Tuesday again, as so many of these pivotal, life-altering moments seem to be. I went into his office, a room I'd been in 100 times before, and I said the words I had practiced in the mirror. I talked about wanting a new direction, about personal growth, about seeking new challenges. I used the approved corporate safe language. I was fitting in one last time, even as I was making my move to leave. And he was kind. He was understanding. He said all the right things about doors being open, about me having a great future. And as I walked out of that office for the last time, I felt not elation, not relief, but a profound and terrifying emptiness. I had jumped out of the plane, but I couldn't see the parachute. I was in free fall. The months that followed were the forest fire. It was the period of intense cleansing heat. Without the structure of a job, without the identity of a title, without the ready-made social circle, I was just me, and I had no idea who that was. The fire burned away everything that was not essential. It burned away the need for external validation. It burned away the fear of what other people thought. It burned away the carefully constructed persona. It left behind only ash and a profound, deafening silence. I would sit for hours, doing nothing, just listening to that silence. It was the most honest sound I had ever heard. And it was in that ash, in that silence, that the first green shoot appeared. It wasn't a grand plan or a new career path. It was a simple, quiet moment of clarity. I was walking through a park, and I saw a child completely absorbed in drawing on the pavement with chalk. She wasn't thinking about who was watching, about whether the drawing was good, about what it would lead to. She was just drawing for the sheer, unadulterated joy of making a mark. And in that moment, I remembered what it felt like to be alive without an agenda. I remembered the feeling of creating something for no other reason than because the impulse was there. That was the first seed, cracked open by the heat of my own personal inferno. Rebirth is not a singular event. It is a slow, patient unfurling. It is the tentative reaching of a green shoot towards a sun. It isn't sure we'll be there. I started to write, just for myself. I wrote about the numbness, about the fire, about the ash. I wrote about the lodgepole pine. The words were clumsy and raw, but they were mine. They weren't filtered through a corporate persona or designed to achieve a specific outcome. They were just marks on a page, evidence that I was still here. Underneath all the wreckage, I started to find my way to people who spoke this new, fragile language of authenticity. They were not the people I had drinks with before. They were artists and wanderers, and people who had also walked through their own fires. Our conversations were not about fitting in. They were messy and passionate, and sometimes uncomfortable. We talked about fear and failure and the beautiful, terrifying struggle of trying to build a life that feels true. There was no template for these friendships. We were building the blueprint as we went along. My life now looks nothing like it did before. It is less stable. It is less predictable. It is by many of the old metrics of failure. I don't have a title. I don't have a 5-year plan. I have a life that is mine. It is a life built not on the foundation of fitting in, but on the bedrock of belonging to myself. The square peg is no longer trying to fit into a round hole. It has realized it was never a peg at all. It was something else entirely. Something that didn't have a name. Something that needed to create its own shape in the world. The pain of that transformation was immense. I would not wish it on anyone. And yet, I would not trade it for anything. The numbness was a far greater prison than the uncertainty ever could be. The fire that burned my life to the ground was the same fire that cleared the land for something new to grow. The heat that felt like it would destroy me was the very thing that saved me. So if you are listening to this and you feel that quiet, persistent rub, that friction between the life you are living and the person you know yourself to be, I am not going to tell you to quit your job or leave your life behind. That is not the point. The point is to stop and truly listen to that friction. Don't sand it down. Don't numb it out. Listen to it. It is the most honest part of you. It is the part of you that knows, deep in its bones, that you are a lodgepole pine in a world that keeps offering you gentle rain. It knows you are built for a different kind of weather. The journey out of a life that fits but isn't right is a lonely one. It is a path you walk by yourself, at least at first. You will feel like you are going backwards, like you are failing at being a normal, functional human being. You will be, and that is okay. Failure at a game you never wanted to play is not a loss. It's a liberation. Don't be afraid of the heat. Don't be afraid of the silence that comes after the blaze. That silence is where you will finally hear your own voice again, faint at first, like a whisper from a great distance. Follow it. It will lead you home. It will lead you to the place where you don't just fit in, but where you truly, deeply, and irrevocably belong. Not because the shape is right, but because the substance is. You are not a peg. You are a forest waiting for its fire. You are a seed waiting for its heat. You are a story waiting for its truth. And your time is now.